Across the United States, urban school districts are facing a severe and persistent crisis, stagnating or declining outcomes in reading and math. When these districts face severe fiscal constraints, school boards and administrators predictably rely on a zero-sum budgeting strategy. They look to balance the books by eliminating what they deem to be non-essential programs. The first subjects targeted for elimination are almost universally world language programs and music education. This diagram outlines the administrative reflex. The district slices funding for music and languages, absorbing it into massive blocks of English and math. But despite increased funding and time strictly for ELA, test scores remain flat or dip downwards. Doubling down on isolated reading interventions while gutting the arts has proven to be a mathematical and pedagogical failure. This budgeting strategy is driven by a core misconception. Administrators assume that the human brain learns to read and calculate independently of other linguistic inputs. Decades of empirical research in neurobiology and linguistics completely contradict this model of isolated learning. Music and languages act as the critical cognitive infrastructure for literacy, providing precise pillars of neuro-auditory tuning and cross-linguistic transfer. Removing these programs to expand the reading block is akin to destroying a bridge's foundation to build a wider deck. To actually repair reading scores, district budget committees must protect music and language instruction as foundational prerequisites to core subjects. The first pillar of evidence for this relies on biology, specifically the neuro-auditory impact of music integration. Music education physically tunes the subcortical auditory system, training the brain to process acoustic sounds with high precision. This precision is the bedrock of phonemic awareness. Before decoding written letters, a child's brain must distinctly process the individual sounds those letters represent. This biological mechanism becomes crucial in urban classrooms, where students frequently navigate distinct dialectical differences, such as the variations between African American English and mainstream American English. The linguistic distance between a student's home dialect and standardized academic text creates a natural processing delay when they are asked to read aloud or comprehend new passages. A biologically tuned auditory system, built through regular musical training, bridges this phonetic gap. It accelerates a student's ability to map their diverse spoken sounds to standard written spellings. When districts cut music education, they literally remove the neurological tool marginalized students rely on to decode standardized academic English. The second pillar of evidence focuses on cognitive transfer, driven specifically by world language acquisition. This equation represents the simple view of reading. It dictates that reading comprehension is the direct product of decoding skills multiplied by oral comprehension. This introduces the mechanism of cross-linguistic transfer. Phonological skills developed in one language seamlessly scaffold the acquisition of reading skills in a second language, like English. Data from the early grade reading studies reveals that home language instruction caused a 15% upward spike in English reading comprehension. Decoding skills are built most efficiently through strong oral comprehension, and those newly forged skills feed directly into the student's second language. We see this exact same cognitive advantage applied domestically within urban dual language programs. A Lakeland dual language program study plots English reading growth. The dual language cohort starts lower in kindergarten, but aggressively accelerates, entirely surpassing mainstream students by second grade. This early exposure is powerful enough to actively counteract the negative literacy effects of low socioeconomic status. This cognitive advantage applies equally to native Spanish speakers and children coming from monolingual English homes. World language instruction is a proven mathematical catalyst for English proficiency. The mechanics of cross-linguistic transfer also apply directly to the dialect variations found within American urban classrooms. This introduces dialect awareness, the practice of systematically comparing a student's home vernacular to standard English, without attaching any reformatory stigma or shame. This comparative practice builds metalinguistic awareness. It forces the brain to step back and view language structure as an abstract object of analysis, rather than just an automatic reflex. This metalinguistic flexibility enables students to purposefully code switch into the academic register required for standardized testing, empowering them to use language as a tool. Schools that fail to foster dialect and metalinguistic awareness actively handicap their students' ability to navigate and decipher complex academic texts. The final pillar of evidence shifts from cognitive processing to social empowerment, the socio-cultural level. Dominant educational ideology often treats low-income, minority linguistic traits as deficits that must be overwritten by middle-class norms. Educational researcher Tara Yasso's community cultural wealth framework proves the exact opposite. Marginalized students bring highly valuable, unrecognized forms of capital into the classroom. High-achieving urban students actively utilize non-dominant forms of capital to succeed, relying on aspirational, familial, navigational, and linguistic capital. Validating a student's home language and culture reduces institutional alienation and directly fuels the positive academic mindset required to achieve. Culturally responsive music and world language classes are often the primary institutional spaces where this cultural wealth is actively recognized and utilized. Eliminating these programs strips students of their inherent navigational capital. It treats them as broken test scores, rather than equipping the whole child with the tools they need for success. The evidence from these three pillars converges to form a cohesive picture of how the human brain actually learns to read. Music biologically tunes the auditory system for phonetic decoding. World languages drive cross-linguistic transfer, rapidly accelerating English comprehension. And validating diverse languages and arts activates community cultural wealth, providing the resilience needed to endure academic rigor. These mechanisms do not operate in isolation. They are deeply entangled and mutually reinforcing. Because reading comprehension is an inherently multidimensional process, it requires a multidimensional curriculum to function. For district superintendents and budget committees facing the brutal reality of fiscal constraints, this data demands a change in strategy. This is what an evidence-based budget model looks like. Music and world language blocks must be laid down first as a wide, unbreakable foundation, allowing ELA and math to be stacked securely on top. Because music and languages act as the biological, cognitive, and sociological substrate, cutting them inevitably causes those upper tiers of ELA and math to collapse. Protecting these subjects is an evidence-based strategy required to actually meet standardized testing mandates. Ultimate success in urban districts depends on funding the cognitive infrastructure of learning.